Lily Thompson, at just 22 years old, had already faced more than most people would face in a lifetime. She grew up in Pinewood, a small town in rural North Carolina, known for its vast tobacco fields and a sense of community that, while warm on the surface, hid ancient secrets. After losing her parents in a tragic car accident 3 years ago, Lily was left alone to fend for herself. With no close relatives and few real friends, she found herself struggling to survive. She started living in her parents' small house, the only thing she had left, supporting herself with temporary jobs, waiting tables at the local restaurant, and doing small jobs to keep the bills paid. But the pain of loss never left her, and loneliness became a constant in her life. One cold November morning, Lily woke up to the sound of rain hitting the window. It was one of those days when everything seemed heavier, harder to bear. Even so, she got up, got ready, and headed to the local market, where she shopped every week with the little money she could save. As he walked through the deserted streets of Pinewood, his gaze fell on a man sitting on the sidewalk in front of the town's church. He was huddled under an old blanket, his beard scraggly and his eyes downcast. Almo. Lily felt her chest tighten at the sight of him. There was something about that man that seemed to resonate with the pain she carried. Without thinking twice, she took out the small piece of bread she had saved for herself and approached him. When the man looked up to meet her, Lily was overcome by a strange sensation. His eyes, dark and deep, seemed to reflect an abyss of suffering and hopelessness that she knew well. She handed him the piece of bread, and he accepted it with an expression of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice hoarse and barely audible. But before she could pull away, he held her hand for a brief moment. "Be careful, girl. Things aren't always what they seem." Lily stood still for a moment, intrigued by his words, but then walked away, returning to her path. She didn't know what he meant by that, but the intensity of his gaze and the strange warning stayed with her for the rest of the day. Later that same night, as Lily prepared a simple vegetable soup in the small kitchen of her home, she couldn't shake the thought of that encounter. There was something unsettling in those eyes, something that aroused a curiosity and a fear that she couldn't explain. As if, when she looked at it, she saw something of herself reflected there. However, it didn't take long for Lily to start forgetting the episode. After all, life in Pinewood continued its routine unabated. People went on with their lives, working in the fields, attending church on Sundays, and sharing the same old stories that had always circulated around the city. But for Lily, something began to change. Small details that previously went unnoticed now bothered her. She began to notice furtive glances, whispers in the streets, and a growing feeling that something was a W. It was then that she first heard the name John Carter, the war veteran who years ago had returned to Pinewood only to mysteriously disappear. No one spoke of him openly, and the few who mentioned his name did so with a mixture of pity and discomfort. But the more Lily listened, the more she began to suspect that the beggar she passed at the church could be John Carter. Determined to uncover the truth, Lily began investigating Carter's story. She visited the few places in town that still remembered him: the old hardware store where he used to work, the bar where he drank every night, and the small house where he lived before he disappeared. With each step, she got closer to a truth that many in Pinewood preferred to keep buried. And without realizing it, while trying to unravel the mystery of the man she found on the sidewalk, Lily began to unearth secrets about her own family that she never knew existed. The days following her encounter with the beggar seemed to envelop Lily in a cloud of uncertainty. The warning he gave her never left her mind, and the more she thought about the story of John Carter, the more she felt there was something she needed to understand. In Pinewood, stories of disappearances were rare, and the few that existed were always shrouded in mystery. But Carter's name seemed to carry a different weight, as if it were embedded in the city's foundations. Lily began her search in the archives of the small municipal library. Dusty shelves held old newspapers where, among announcements of harvests and local festivals, Lily found scattered mentions of Carter. There was a note about his return from the war, describing him as a local hero, but in later editions his name appeared less and less, until it disappeared altogether. There was no official news about his disappearance, which made her believe that he had been deliberately forgotten. Determined to understand more, Lily began talking to some of the town's oldest residents. Most avoided the subject, but one woman in particular, Mrs. Mildred, one of Pinewood's oldest and loneliest neighbors, agreed to speak. Mildred was over 80 years old, with a still sharp mind and an impressive memory. She remembered John Carter well, describing him as a different man when he returned from the war. He was kind, a good boy before he went to the front, but he came back broken, with the eyes of Lily listened attentively, and Mildred went on to reveal that Carter had been haunted by nightmares and a deep sense of guilt. He began drinking heavily, distancing himself from the few people who still cared about him. But there was a night no one likes to remember, said Mildred, lowering her voice as if she feared being overheard. That night there was a fire in his house. People say it was an accident, but there are those who believe it wasn't. And after that, John disappeared. The story left Lily uneasy. She knew that fires in Pinewood were rare and almost always investigated thoroughly, but this one seemed to have been swept under the rug. Lily decided to go to the site of the fire, now a forgotten ruin on the outskirts of town. The charred walls still stood silent testimony to a barely explained tragedy. As he explored the ruins, something caught his attention, a metal safe hidden under rubble. With effort, she managed to open it, revealing an old diary. The pages were partially burned, but what remained revealed fragments of John Carter's thoughts. The notes spoke of overwhelming guilt, night visions, and a conspiracy in the city involving influential people. Lily could hardly believe what she was reading. The city he grew up in, which he always considered peaceful and welcoming, seemed to have a dark side. As he flipped through the pages, he came across a familiar name that made his heart stop for a moment. Richard Thompson, his own grandfather. Confused and scared, Lily began to connect the dots. Her grandfather, a respected man in Pinewood, had died before she was born, but his memory was held in reverence in the family. What would he have to do with John Carter? And why was his family name involved in something so dark? As she pondered these questions, Lily realized she was being watched. When he turned around, he saw a man standing in the distance, in the shadows. He didn't look like he belonged there, but his gaze was fixed and attentive, as if he were there to make sure she didn't find out more than she should. From that moment on, Lily began to feel that she was in danger. Somehow their investigations were touching forces that preferred to remain hidden, and what was initially a curiosity about the story of a war veteran now seemed to turn into something much more personal. Determined to find out the truth, Lily decided she couldn't trust anyone else in town. She needed help, but she knew it had to be someone from outside, someone who wasn't entangled in Pinewood's secrets. So she reached out to an old family friend, Tom, who had moved to Raleigh years earlier and now worked as an investigative journalist. Tom, although surprised to hear Lily's story, agreed to help her. They began working together, cross-checking information and interviewing other people in town who might have knowledge about what really happened to John Carter and how Richard Thompson was involved. With each new clue, the plot became more intricate and the danger more palpable. As the investigation progressed, Lily began receiving anonymous threats warning her to stop. Her house was vandalized, and one night, she was followed by a car as she walked home from work. The tension was rising, and Lily knew she was approaching something big, something that could change not just her life but the entire history of Pinewood. The threats against Lily became more and more frequent. Pinewood, which once seemed like a peaceful town, now revealed itself to be a place full of shadows and buried secrets. Lily knew she was getting closer to the truth, but at what cost? Each step forward seemed to take her further away from the few certainties she still had about her life and her family. One afternoon, Tom called Lily with urgency in his voice. "I found something you need to see. It's big, Lily. I think that explains a lot, but you need to be prepared for what's coming." They agreed to meet at Tom's house outside of town, where he thought they would be safer. When Lily arrived, Tom was visibly agitated. He had a manila envelope in his hand marked with the seal of a Raleigh law firm. "I received this anonymously earlier today," he explained. "It's a series of legal documents, bank records, and letters. It all points to a network of corruption in the city, led by your grandfather, Richard Thompson." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She took the documents and started reading. At first, the words didn't make sense, but as the names and numbers repeated themselves, a disturbing image began to form. Richard Thompson was not only a respected farmer and businessman. He was involved in illicit activities that ranged from the exploitation of workers to the embezzlement of public funds. John Carter, upon returning from the war, discovered these activities by chance and tried to report them. "But these letters here," said Tom, pointing to a stack of yellowed papers, "are from Carter to the federal government. He tried to expose what was going on, but somehow it never got out of Pinewood. His grandfather and other powerful men in the city did everything they could to ensure that Carter was discredited and eventually eliminated. The shock was so much that Lily could barely breathe. How could her grandfather, the man her mother described as a hero, be involved in something so terrible? And even worse, how could his family live with this secret for so long? But there is more," Tom continued. "John Carter did not die in the fire. He survived and lived in the shadows, trying to avoid those who persecuted him. He became the man you met in the church, living in fear and guilt, but still trying to warn someone about what they discovered." Lily's world was falling apart. The revelation that the beggar was John Carter, alive but broken, was a difficult truth to swallow. And now, she understood why the threats, the suspicious looks, and the sepulchral silence that covered Carter's story in Pinewood. As Lily and Tom tried to figure out their next move, night fell, and darkness seemed to swallow Tom's small house. They knew they were about to unearth something too big for the town to ignore. Tom suggested that they go to the federal police with the evidence, but Lily was hesitant. She wanted to protect Carter and also wanted to understand if there was any redemption for her family. It was then that the lights in Tom's house suddenly went out, plunging them into total darkness. The silence that followed was eerie, until it was broken by the sounds of heavy footsteps outside. Tom moved quickly, grabbing a baseball bat he kept next to the door. "Stay behind me," he whispered. But before they could react, the front door was broken down. Two men entered, both with cold, calculated expressions. "You've already gone too far," said one of them, his voice low and menacing. "This ends now." Lily felt terror overcome her, but at the same time a fierce determination took hold of her. "I couldn't let it all end there. Not after everything you discovered." Tom tried to resist, but the men were strong and experienced. Within minutes he was immobilized, and Lily found herself faced with an impossible choice. Hand over the documents and forget everything, or continue and risk losing everything, including her life. But then something unexpected happened. A third figure appeared in the doorway. The beggar, John Carter. Despite her fragile appearance, there was a renewed strength in her eyes. "Release her," he said, his voice firm yet shaky. "I'm what you want. Leave her out of this." The men looked at each other, surprised by Carter's arrival. They didn't expect him to have the courage to show up, but his presence changed the dynamics of the situation. "John, what are you doing?" Lily asked, her voice cracking with tension. "I'm finishing what I started years ago," he replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the men. "The time has come to settle the score." The atmosphere in the room became electrifying, as if time had stopped. No one knew for sure what would happen next, but everyone knew something was about to change forever. John Carter's presence in Tom's house was a catalyst for the chaos that followed. The two men who had broken into the house hesitated when they saw the man they believed they had silenced forever. Carter, despite his worn and frail appearance, still possessed an unwavering determination. His look was that of someone who was willing to risk everything to finally expose the truth. "Do you think you can stop us, Carter?" one of the men teased, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "You were a hero once, but now, you're nothing but a ghost." Carter, without looking away, replied in a firm voice, "Ghosts haunt because they have unfinished business, and I'm here to finish what I started." Tom, still immobilized, took advantage of the distraction to partially free himself, but before he could do anything, the sound of sirens in the distance broke the tense silence. The men looked at each other, aware that time was running out. "We have to leave now," the other man said, pulling his companion toward the door. Before they left, one of them turned to Lily with a threatening expression. This isn't over yet. Keep getting into things where you shouldn't be, and you'll pay dearly." With those words, they disappeared into the darkness, leaving the front door wide open. Lily ran up to Carter, who looked like he had aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. He was exhausted, but a strange calm had come over him. "You came here because of me," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Why?" "Because you gave me a reason to fight again," Carter replied with a slightly sad smile. "I lived in the shadows for so long that I forgot what it was like to feel hope. But when you looked me in the eyes that day, I saw something. I saw that kindness still existed, and it gave me strength." The sirens approached, and soon the police were at the house. Tom explained the attack, while Lily and Carter were taken to safety. With the police involved, the situation in Pinewood began to change, but that didn't mean Lily and Carter were out of danger. The forces at play were powerful and influential, and they would not give up so easily. Over the next few days, Lily, Tom, and Carter continued to work together, now under police protection, to fully uncover the web of corruption that permeated Pinewood. More documents came to light, revealing the names of others involved, including respected community figures. Little by little, the truth was revealed. Richard Thompson, Lily's grandfather, led a scheme that exploited workers and embezzled funds intended for rebuilding the city after the war. When Carter found out and tried to report, Lily felt torn. Although she knew she needed to continue exposing the truth, it was painful to accept that her grandfather, the man she grew up admiring, had been responsible for so much suffering. Carter, who also bore the burden of his own guilt for failing to stop the corruption, helped Lily understand that despite her grandfather's mistakes, she was not doomed to follow the same path. "We are not our ancestors," he said. "We can choose to be different. And you, Lily, are choosing the right S." With Tom's help, they were able to get the evidence to the media, and Pinewood's story began to be known throughout the state. Authorities began formal investigations, and several of those involved were arrested, while others tried to escape but were quickly captured. During this time, Lily and Carter developed a deep friendship. Carter temporarily lived with Lily, and together, they tried to find meaning in their lives, now that the truth was exposed. But Lily knew something was still missing. The weight of events, the threats that still hung over them, and the fact that Pinewood would never be the same, created a cloud of uncertainty. One morning, Lily found Carter sitting on the porch looking out at the horizon. "What will happen now?" she asked, sitting down next to him. Carter sighed, looking distant. "I don't know yet, Lily, but I know that I'm finally free from the past. And you should be too. Don't let your grandfather's mistakes define your life." Lily knew he was right, but she also knew she was approaching a crucial decision. The revelation of Pinewood's secrets had changed everything, but the future was still uncertain. However, by Carter's side and with Tom's support, she felt that for the first time in a long time, there was a chance to rebuild her life, and maybe even help Pinewood rebuild itself too. The city, even after everything that had happened, was still Lily's home. And although Pinewood's foundations had been shaken, she believed she could help build something new, something better. But he knew that the road ahead would not be easy, and that despite everything, there were still forces willing to fight to keep the old power structures intact. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and events. The revelation of Pinewood's secrets had shocked the town, and investigations were in full swing. Local newspapers and even national networks began covering the story, highlighting the corruption scheme that had permeated the community for decades. But not everyone was willing to accept the fall of the ancient powers without resistance. Richard Thompson's allies, desperate to salvage what was left of his reputation and avoid arrest, began to mobilize. Rumors of conspiracies and plans to silence Lily, Carter, and Tom were circulating around the city. The air was thick with tension, and Lily knew the real confrontation was yet to come. One night, while Carter was sleeping in the guest room at Lily's house, she received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end was cold and calculated. "Did you think it would end like this? Think again. Tomorrow, when the sun sets, everything you know and love will disappear. This is your final warning." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. She hung up the phone, hands shaking, and immediately woke Carter up. "We have to get out of here. Now," she said, the urgency in her voice unmistakable. Carter, although tired, did not hesitate. He knew that the situation was serious and that although they had made a lot of progress, there were still those who wanted to prevent the truth from fully coming to light. "Where are we going?" he asked, as he grabbed a backpack with his essentials. "To Tom's house," replied Lily. "He has contacts, maybe we can get outside help." The two left in a hurry, driving along the dark and deserted roads of Pinewood. But as they approached Tom's house, something seemed wrong. There were no lights on, and the house was plunged into an oppressive silence. "Stay in the car," Carter said as he went out to check. Lily nervously waited, but the sense of imminent danger was overwhelming. Minutes passed and Carter didn't return. Something was terribly wrong. With her mind made up, Lily got out of the car and walked to the front door, which was ajar. As she entered, the smell of smoke hit her, a smell that brought back terrible memories of the fire that destroyed the Carter home so many years ago. She found Carter on the living room floor, unconscious, and beside him Tom, injured but still conscious. "They caught me by surprise," he muttered, with difficulty. "There's a timer in the kitchen. It's going to go off." Panic gripped Lily, but she knew there was no time to waste. With Tom's help, she managed to drag Carter out of the house. As soon as the trio managed to get far enough away, a resounding explosion shook the ground, sending flames and debris into the night sky. Tom's house was destroyed in seconds. They sat in silence, observing what was left of the house. The gravity of the situation prevailed, but it was also clear that they could not go back. This was a declaration of war from the remnants of the old Pinewood regime, a sign that they were willing to do anything to keep their secrets buried. The police, alerted by the explosion, soon arrived at the scene. But Lily knew she couldn't rely on local authorities alone. The enemies they faced had the power and influence to manipulate the system in their favor. "We need to see this through to the end," Carter said, still stunned but with renewed determination in his eyes. "We have just crossed a line of no return. With the help of Tom, now under police protection and in contact with investigative journalists outside the city, Lily and Carter began planning the final coup against those who still held the reins of power in Pinewood. They knew they had to act quickly, before their enemies had the chance to react again. The plan involved a direct attack on the heart of the scheme, a secret meeting organized by Richard Thompson's last allies, who planned to erase all remaining evidence and rebuild his network of influence. Using information gathered by Tom and the courage of Carter, who finally decided to confront his past head-on, they managed to break into the meeting, taking with them irrefutable evidence and a live feed to ensure everything was recorded. When Lily and Carter confronted the conspirators, the tension was palpable. The group's leader, an influential businessman and former partner of Richard Thompson, tried to use intimidation, but it was too late. With federal police on the way and the media covering every detail, the men were arrested one by one. But the climax came when Carter, in front of everyone, revealed his true identity. The man who had been silenced for so long finally had his voice heard. "For years you tried to bury me," he said, looking at the faces that once hunted him. "But now, I'm living proof that the truth always finds a way to emerge." Lily at his side felt a rush of emotions. Finally, the truth was being exposed, and the weight she had been carrying on her shoulders began to lift. Her family's name was tarnished, but she knew she had done what was right. And with Carter by her side, she found the strength to move forward no matter what the future held. As night fell over Pinewood, the city lights seemed a little brighter. The air was lighter, as if a cycle of darkness had finally come to an end. But Lily knew the journey to recovery was just beginning, both for the city and for herself. When the dust finally settled and the last conspirators were arrested, Pinewood began to feel the weight of everything that had been revealed. The city, once known for its quaint charm and close-knit community, now faced a difficult reality. Many of its most respected leaders were involved in heinous crimes, and the trust that once united the city had been seriously shaken. For Lily, the days following the confrontation were a mixture of relief and sadness. She had faced the truth about her family and freed herself from the weight of secrets that haunted her. But she knew recovery would be slow. Many of Pinewood's residents now looked at her with a mixture of respect and suspicion. She was, after all, the woman who had toppled the city's pillars. Tom, who had become an essential figure in the fight for justice, was recovering from the attack on his home, but with a renewed conviction to continue to use his voice to expose the truth. He decided to stay at Pinewood longer, working on a series of articles that detailed the corruption and Lily and Carter's struggle to expose it all. His series became a hit, bringing to light stories from other small towns facing similar problems. Carter, in turn, seemed to have finally found the peace he had been searching for. With the truth exposed and the guilty facing justice, he no longer felt the need to live in the shadows. However, the road to personal recovery was still long. He became a supportive figure for Lily, and together they began to plan how to rebuild their lives. One afternoon, sitting on the porch of Lily's house, which now felt more like home than ever, they talked about the future. "What's next?" asked Carter, with a slight smile, as he watched the trees swaying in the wind. "I don't know for sure," Lily replied with a sigh, "but I know that whatever it is, we're not alone." She looked at him fondly, recognizing that despite everything they had been through, they had found a new family in each other. Federal authorities offered Carter protection, but he refused. Pinewood was his home, and he wanted to help the town rebuild itself, even if it meant facing the judgmental gaze of many who saw him as a living reminder of the mistakes of the past. "I spent too much time running away," he told Lily. "Now it's time to face everything head-on." Together, they became involved in community projects to help the city recover. Lily began working on a foundation in memory of victims of corruption, dedicated to ensuring that what happened in Pinewood would never be repeated anywhere else. She used resources left by her family to finance the project, turning a tarnished legacy into something positive. Carter, with Tom's help, began writing a book about his experience, not just to tell his story, but to inspire others to never give up fighting for the truth, no matter the consequences. He believed that by sharing his past, he could help heal the city's deep wounds. Pinewood also began to change. With new elected leaders and new transparency in all areas of administration, the city began to rebuild trust among its residents. The process was slow, but little by little, the wounds began to heal. For Lily, the end of this journey was marked by a mixture of pain and growth. She lost the idealized image of her family, but found something more valuable: the truth and the strength to move forward. She and Carter continued to support each other, finding comfort in knowing that despite everything, they had made a difference. One Sunday, when the city gathered for a ceremony to honor the victims of the corruption scheme, Lily took the stage to speak. Her eyes met Carter's in the crowd, and she felt a rush of gratitude and hope. "We cannot change the past," she began, "but we can learn from it, and we can choose to be better, to do better for ourselves and for future generations." Lily's words resonated deeply with those who heard them. Pinewood, a town that was almost destroyed by its secrets, now had a chance to transform into something new, something better. When the ceremony ended, Lily and Carter stood back, watching the sun set over the fields surrounding Pinewood. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they had survived the storm, and now together, they could build something beautiful from the wreckage. A year has passed since Pinewood was rocked by its darkest revelations. The city, which once hid behind secrets and silence, now rose with new strength. The battle scars were still there, but instead of weakening the community, they strengthened it. The old Pinewood spirit of unity and resilience was coming back to life. Lily became an important figure in the town, a silent leader everyone admired. Her work at the Victims Memorial Foundation had grown, and she now traveled to other small towns, sharing Pinewood's story and helping other communities prevent the same mistakes. She also found new purpose in rebuilding her family's farm, transforming it into a community center where residents gathered to discuss ideas and solutions to local challenges. Carter, in turn, completed his book. Shadows of the Past, the story of Pinewood, became a bestseller, not only for its gripping narrative, but for the courage it demonstrated in facing the ghosts of the past. With the royalties, he decided to create a small bookstore in Pinewood, a place where stories, especially those that reveal difficult truths, could be shared and discussed. The relationship between Lily and Carter evolved into a deep and unshakable friendship. They continued to support each other, finding comfort and strength in each other's presence. Carter, now more at peace with his past, had begun to see Pinewood not just as a place of pain, but as a home where he could finally be part of something bigger than his own struggles. Pinewood, under new leadership, began to flourish again. With community projects led by Lily and the support of Carter and Tom, the city began to attract new residents, interested in building a life in a place that had been through so much, but was now a symbol of resilience and resilience. The city's old image, tarnished by corruption, was being replaced by a narrative of renewal and hope. One late afternoon, Lily and Carter met on the balcony of the bookstore as they did from time to time to watch the sunset. The sky was tinged with orange and pink, and a gentle breeze carried the smell of freshly plowed earth from the surrounding fields. There was a sense of peace in the air, a tranquility they had worked so hard to achieve. "Do you think we did enough?" Lily asked, breaking the silence with a question that had been lingering in her mind. Carter, after a long sigh, responded, "We've done more than enough. The city is changing, the people are changing. That's what matters." Lily smiled, feeling the weight of the words. He knew the path to get there hadn't been easy, but now he felt at peace. She had helped turn his pain into something positive, to turn Pinewood's dark past into a light for the future. As the sun sank below the horizon, Lily and Carter continued to talk, their voices mixing with the soft sound of the wind and the laughter of children in the distance, playing in the streets of the city they helped save.